Hi, Mr. Delbert Richardson. May I have permission to record you for a special talk with the Seattle Public Library?
Permission granted.
Thank you. This talk is made possible with support from the Seattle Public Library Foundation, and today we have community scholar, second generation storyteller, educator, and historian, Mr. Delbert Richardson. Delbert, welcome. We're so excited to chat with you today. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you. And I am so excited to be here because you don't know this, but I'm one of your fans.
Well, that is the feeling is mutual, Delbert, because you have such an incredible way that you bring history into from the past into the present, and I think that will change the future. So that's why I'm excited that one part of our work today is to let folks know that you did a keynote back in the wintertime, and as the sun is shining in Seattle, it's springtime. So we're coming back to let people know, hey, there's an incredible conversation that happened last winter, and you should check it out. And in it, we talk about your exhibit at King Street Station. Can you tell folks the title of your exhibit and why you put it together?
The Oh yes, thank you. I had to think for a second. The name of my work is the American History Travel Museum, The Unspoken Truth. But the theme of the event you're referring to is called 1619 Resistance, Resilience, Remembrance.
I remember I was writing down those titles for the summary, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to make sure Delbert gets those titles right because I'm not going to mess it up. But, just to jump things off, when we were beginning to get into our interview prep, you said, well, Davita, where do you want to go? What were some things that stood out for you? So I'm going to make a simple observation, and then I'm wondering if you will take it from there. I noticed throughout your talk, instead of saying slaves, and more often and instead of saying enslaved person, you said ancestor. And I know that that resonated with me because I think sometimes when we think the word slave or even sometimes enslaved, it takes us away from how our ancestors ended up in the situation that they were in when they were enduring European chattel slavery. So when you think about how you're naming how history took place, what are some of the strategies you use to make sure that our ancestors stay humanized and visible?
Mm. Well, first of all, when you said it, I got goosebumps, right? Because I love it when people share with me what they've heard me say. Because the reality is, when I'm in storytelling, I'm gonna say mode for lack of a better term, it's an out of body experience. I don't always remember what I say because I'm being channeled by the ancestors. And so when you asked the question or made the reference, you heard me say enslaved and ancestors, what I've grown to appreciate is the wanting, this is me, of the connection, right? So ancestors denotes connection. So that whole notion of slaved, enslaved puts my language ownership on those that were the perpetrators of American chattel slavery. And the term slave is a noun, which really demeans someone to take on that word as being who they are. But enslaved puts it back on, gives that back to someone else or some group of people that's not mine. But the ancestor piece is something I'm always wanting to make the connection to because I don't want to feel disconnected because I'm not. So this is a library interview, and words are power, my language, or a certain level of empowerment. So one of my strategies when I'm storytelling is to leverage words in a way that creates hopefully a whole nother lens by which of looking at things. And so for you just to make that observation, enslaved but ancestors is me. I'm gonna say play on words, but really utilizing the words to hopefully give a different experience.
That's powerful, Delbert. Um, just kind of following up on that, I'm going to ask a two-part question because you pointed out, hey, this is a library program, and whenever you underscore the library, that tells me as someone who works at the library, let's talk about the collection. So that'll be part two. But just for part one, and again, the point of our conversation is for folks to get excited and jump into your keynote that we have on our YouTube channel. Is that in your keynote, you said a few sentences that I'm going to say back to you. And when I say these sentences back to you, I'd love for you to maybe respond and then share if you have in mind any readings that you think couple well with what you share. So you said, I don't do allies, I don't do advocates, I do abolitionists. So can you put abolitionists in a historical frame? Because I know we have 21st century abolitionists, but I also thought, we do a lot of equity and inclusion work in Seattle. And so you hear the words allies and you hear the words advocates, and you do a little bit of work there to give some additional challenges and assignments. So I was curious if you could tell us a little bit more about why you said what you said.
Yeah, thank you. But you don't have to chuckle because the way you the way you said that is kind of like ebonics for you and I. And for those that may not know, ebonics is a term that was coined as how we show up, meaning Black folks, and how we talk in vernacular, right? So I don't do, if in English may not be grammatically correct, I don't do, but
I
you're
knew
right.
exactly what you meant. I knew exactly what you
I
meant.
know you do, right? I don't do. No, no, no. So here again, you know, what I've learned, you hear me say this quite a bit, what I've learned and what I've experienced, because I'm still growing, is that I may only have a snippet of time to capture one's attention, curiosity, and hopefully assist their imagination, right? And so I do that with words or phrases. So the term advocates and allies are usually associated with white people. Now, this is important. I'm being interviewed, so I'm gonna speak through the context by which I show up. And so, and I move through from a racialized lens to a humanity lens whenever I see fit when I talk. So through a racialized lens, advocates and allies usually associated with white folks, good, bad, or indifferent, right? But when you start looking at the abolitionists, one of the reasons why I use that is that I use it in a way to create a question for white folks. And there were Black abolitionists also too. So I'll bring up white abolitionists that, for the most part, were willing to risk and sacrifice, not for Black people, but for humanity. But I'll ask white folks, what was different about them than an advocate or an ally? And to me, the difference is they were willing to give up, lose, or sacrifice. And I don't see that as much in an ally or an advocate, because they can weave in and out in regarding how they want to show up in a space. They can be an ally today or an advocate. So I love to give the example. I can be, if I was white, I can be an ally or an advocate. All I got to do is get a Black Lives Matter t-shirt and put something in my window and march on Martin Luther King Day, and then I'm done, right? No, Delbert, don't do that. I want white folks that are willing to sacrifice and give for the good of humanity. And here's the thing, and I tell white folks this, you don't get to choose if you're an abolitionist. In my book, I don't tell you that, it showed up in deeds. So the way you show up determines, for me, where you are on this journey of changing the world with me. So allies, advocates, abolitionists, 3 different categories. When it's associated with white folks, I'm looking for abolitionists. That way I know I ain't gotta look behind me because they got my back.
Once again, Delbert, I'm going to say the way you bring things into view is so powerful. So I'm just going to say back what I heard is when you're framing history, the history makers are the ones who don't differentiate risk, that they're all in it together at the same time to make a better world. Can I go back to the second part of my question, which was That's quite a statement to make in the US. So I wonder if there were books or songs or films that helped you have that worldview. And if so, would you be so kind to share them with us? Because libraries are, they're important bodies of knowledge, right? And so if our library can reflect some of the mindset that you have, that would be exciting. And I'm also curious if the books that you read are in our collection.
Well, I always get a little nervous when somebody asks me for references because I got part of a treasure trove of references in the back. And so, yes, there are books, there are documents, and I love to think about primary resources, Davida. You know, primary resources are those resources or those voices that were there. And I always got to be careful of reading stories because we have a tendency to, I say we as a people, we have a tendency to exaggerate or highlight. For example, when I go watch a movie at the theater, I'm pretty sure it's not 100% factual because it's done in a way to create, I think, either a story or an interest or to build on a theme. A documentary, in my view, is based on facts. It's plain and simple. And how those facts lands is up to the eye of the beholder. So when we start to think about books, when I look at the Mother Africa section, one of the first books that comes to mind is a book that talks about ancient Kemet. Just a book that talks about Kemet. See, I didn't say Egypt. I said Kemet because Kemet is a term that was associated with pre-Egyptian times. And so that's that section. American Chattel Slavery, I would probably say, I have to look back at it, a peculiar institution. That is a white guy that wrote that book that speaks through a truthful lens. That's the second section. Third section, probably I don't teach civil rights. I teach Jim Crow, right? So if there was one book, it will be Without Sanctuaries. It's about the documentation of a white guy who went down south and wanted to find all those stories about lynchings. And so what he did was he went to a lot of towns down there and asked some of the white elders if they had any postcards of lynchings. So as a result of those postcards, he wrote an amazing, he documented the history and the brutality of our ancestors in the South through photography. And last but not least, the inventions and the inventor section, I would probably say just Google Black inventors. And when I say that, the library can go anywhere in that. They can look at Black scientists, Black astrophysicists, Black mathematicians. By the way, I think, here we go. There's one section in the Mother Africa section that connects to the invention section. I have a storyboard that has about 10 book covers, Davida, and all the book covers has two themes, Africa and mathematics. And it talks about how a lot of mostly white men were obsessed with this ancient knowledge. Look at that face of yours. With the ancient knowledge that came out of Kemet. So here in the Mother Africa section, and you can have a parallel intersection in terms of Black brilliance by looking up math in ancient Africa.
That's what's up. Okay, so we're kind of getting deeper in it, and I just want to repeat what I heard is if you want to understand some of the violence that happened, particularly during Jim Crow, look at the book Without Sanctuary. That book, I remember it. Um, I don't have words. It's a powerful book, but also moving through the pain into the other things because we're not only our pain, we're also our intelligence and our brilliance and how we apply what we know. So understanding Black inventors, They come in all embodiments, and they happen across time and history, and they're here in the U.S. and they're in Mother Africa, and that there is a particular connection between Africa and mathematics. That was me taking notes, quick notes. Um,
Mm.
I wanted. We're getting to. I'd probably say we're about midway through the interview, and this interview might get divided up. So I don't know how our marketing team will handle it, but in case it gets divided up, I wanted to have a moment. And this is when I met you. I was working at a museum, so you know that there's a way that I'm thinking about the archiving of this historic moment where you showed this collection that I've always known as a community based collection that went on the road with you, that for a moment in time during a historic pandemic went to King Street Station. And if I understood your talk correctly, the the exhibit itself was bookended. So Mother Africa and Blackanauts. And Blackanauts, I was like, I know Mother Africa, but I had not heard of Blackanauts before. So if you had to connect that beginning and the end, and please correct me if I didn't get it right, where were you going with that opening chapter and your closing salvo? What did you want people to hold in those two spaces? Because you're a
Well,
storyteller.
wow, that's an amazing question. I love being vulnerable and transparent. So the Black and Not section is actually owned by another brother, right? Isom Taylor. We're both part of African American Writers Alliance. And he said, Delbert, I've got this collection that I want to know if I can add to your exhibit. And of course, I said, well, sure. How big is it? He said, well, I got about 20 boards. I'm thinking, oh, that's a lot, right? I said, bring it down. Really not knowing. He said it was Black or Not. Love it, right? And so getting back to your question, um, Mother Africa and Blackanot is an intersection and a parallel, because Blackanot talks about, Blackanot has a reference to astronauts. If you know anything about astronauts, it has to do with space travel. You know anything about space travel, it's connected to the stars, right? So now let's go back to Mother Africa. My ancestors were studying the stars for thousands of years. So there's this group called the Dogons in Mali. They had located Sirius B, the dog star, long before the invention of the European telescope. So there's this connection to the stars as it relates to Mother Africa. It's an amazing section of Blackanauts. And I want to believe that the importance of my brother's exhibit is he who tells the story controls the narrative. And he was determined to let primarily Black and brown people know, but white people know also too, that Black people were not just pickers of cotton, right? We weren't just agriculturalists. We're scientists, engineers, mathematicians, astrophysicists. And as a result of that, we were able to elevate to what I want to believe one of the highest levels of science, which is to get into a spaceship and travel to the moon and to other places. So I just thought it was extremely powerful, because he works through a storyboard paradigm like I do, because a lot of our children learn through different modalities, some through touching, looking, and hearing. And so these boards had an image of a Black person and some verbiage underneath it. And I just thought it was amazing. And I plan on including it going forward in my installation.
That's what I'm talking about. Well, we're getting to maybe I have two more questions, and then I kind of wanted you to freestyle if you felt like it.
Uh-oh.
Well, you are so many things, and I feel like there's the things that I thought to ask, but you know so much, so I have to be humble when I'm asking questions just to see the floor. Um, these questions kind of bridge things, but you kind of in a way you wrap my mind, so you already started to bring it up. Um, in the time, because when I saw your closing talk, it wasn't the first time I saw them. but every time I see them, I'm moved. In your collection, and I think we should just take a moment as you're answering this question for you to just tell anybody who hasn't seen your talk what your collection is. But there's a moment where you see shackles that were used on children who had to endure European slavers. And I was thinking to myself when I saw that, um, our children are watching.
Mm.
Um, and so when we present a history that is certainly cruel, but also pertinent to some of the ways that we ask some of our children to live. Um, what do you want to tell a black child, and I would actually say for any child that comes from people who have to endure colonization during European expansion? Um, there has to be a moment where a child is told, "You're not the worst things that happen to your people, and these are the ways that you can begin to know who you are." So, where would you suggest that children could begin looking? Um,
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that because I didn't know where we were going to start and where we are going to end and where we're going to go. So I brought something here. I brought one of my many beautiful pieces. And this is called a Sankofa bird. So if I was going to talk to children and young adults, I would tell them the story of the Sankofa bird, which is a mythical bird of the Akan people in Ghana. And so I say mythical because, we love magic and imagination, but the myth about it is he flies forward with his head backwards. And you may not be able to see it, but there's an egg in his mouth right here. So the belief is in order for you, my young genius, my young future storytellers and game changers and world changers, you must be willing to go back and fetch that came before you. Your rich history, your rich culture. Now, I haven't racialized this, Davida, and this is important because we all have a rich culture and rich history, but we got to want to go back and fetch that because we're going to really need to lean on that now and to build on it. So you talk about this word ascending. Descend means to decline, ascend means to raise. So as a result of this Sankofa bird, my young people, you represent the egg. You represent the future. And guess what? We're watching. The next thing I will share primarily with African American children is that this is not who you are. These are actual primary resources the video we're talking about. This is for a child. This is for an adult. See the different sizes? This could fit inside of there, right? But this is not who you are. This is what was done to you. So what I brought, can you hear that, Davida? These are runaway restraints. So young Black people, young Black children, this represents resistance. This is who you are. We were enslaved. So regardless of that, we resisted, we fought back. And they would put these around our ankles, or in some cases around our neck, because they wanted to keep track of us. What we used to do is put mud on them anyway and run anyway. So you're capable of being whatever you want to be, but I'm gonna request two things of you. You work hard and you just believe. Just believe. Because the soil has been sowed. So here you are. So let's get busy.
See, I'm loving that. I'm loving that because what I heard you say was work hard and believe in yourself because your ancestors already believe in you. Just to wind down, And again, I said you could freestyle at the end. You could drop some knowledge because I know you're good at doing that. Um, but I wanted you to kind of think about giving an assignment. So, all throughout the pandemic, when I've worked with Black civic leaders, I've said, and this can be for anybody. I know sometimes we say, we got to speak to the young people because they're our future. I work at a library, so I believe in lifelong learning, and I feel like if we ascend from the stars, as you just said, any given moment in your life is valuable, and you're valuable. So, how do you want to use your time? And because I work in a place of knowledge, I'm curious. What do you think the assignments of people who are living through? I'm channeling my mentor at the library, Valerie Garrett Turner. This really remarkable time we're in. What would be a good assignment for the historic era that we're in with this pandemic, for people to be pursuing liberation and self actualization if we're on brand for the conversation we've been having? What would be a good assignment? What's an assignment that you would give us?
Well, if I believe that what the pandemic has created is an opportunity to spend more time with the self, right? Whether you want to or not, we're all in some ways um, gifted with the time with the self. See how I frame that? It's a gift. And of course, it's a very, very difficult time. I don't want to minimize it. A lot of loss, uh, depression rose, anxiety rose, addictions rose. But so I really want to start looking at what are the gifts that come out of the pandemic, right? So one of the gifts is spending time with the self. So if there was an assignment and we didn't, and I'm gonna racialize this, okay? Because I think it's important because I teach about race. For those that identify of European descent, do some more work, do some more work around your ethnic identity. For instance, if you're from Germany, Italy, Poland, um, Ireland, I want you to really start looking into that history, because what I really hoping you'll find is some nuggets. And the nuggets I would hope you'll find is that one time you were an oppressed people in the Americas. I think it's very important. We start talking about race as a social construct, and white being the dominant color and black being the color that's less favorable. What I would want for those individuals that identify as white to start doing some self-work around what's your ethnic identity. So hopefully as a result of that, you'll start to develop an empathy muscle, so you can start feeling in a way that maybe you haven't felt in the past. And if you're a Black or brown person, we didn't go into this that much, but my museum starts with Mother Africa, and it goes to American chattel slavery, Jim Crow, and then the inventions. So I tell Asian students, Davida, or Pacific Island students, or Latino, Latinx students, to replace Mother Africa with your country or continent of origin. So if you're Polynesian, let's go to Samoa. If you're Chinese, let's go to China, Japan, so forth. Because we all have one thing in common as melanated people, my language. We all come from a rich culture and rich heritage and rich traditions. So I would want you to start doing some work, going back to start finding those nuggets that are part of you so you can feel better about yourself. Now I'm saying better because I'm assuming that there's some better we feel about ourselves, but there's always, I want to believe, a desire for some improvement in those areas. And we start to look at our past through a lens of our ancestors and through our lens of culture. And I'm talking to all groups now, we'll find this richness that we never knew about because we're not taught about that in our public schools and private schools for that matter. That's the assignment.
I love that assignment. Delbert, I have to say thank you so much for spending time with us. Again, if you're tuning in to this short talk, one of the reasons why we're doing it is we just added Delbert's closing talk from his exhibit at King Street Station to the library's YouTube channel. It'll be premiering in April, and that's the closing talk. But this particular conversation, you won't see this until May. So I wanted you to know you could start checking out the video early. Hopefully our marketing team will share that out. Delbert, thank you for sharing your time. And is there anything else that you want to share before we wind down?
Yes, we've got to do this again.
That you want? Well, you know what? I will say the one assignment that I gave myself while I was listening to you, and this kind of comes from the work that I do in public engagement, is working with people who have been affected by racism to produce knowledge at the library that improves their day-to-day life with a focus on civics and creativity. And a good amount of that work has been around Black liberation and Indigenous sovereignty. And as I was listening to you, I was thinking, we're in this momentous moment and occasion where we're looking back at the history of the boarding schools. We keep finding all these
Mhm.
dead children's bodies. And we also know that indigenous people were enslaved before we brought over our ancestors from Africa. And so
Mhm.
I do see a follow up conversation where, as Africans on Turtle Island, we get to think about all those shared common ground we have with indigenous folks on Turtle Island, and also the histories that we can build together. So I love the way you actually, um, one of my community godmamas is Mama Makata, and she pointed out to me there was a point where we didn't have all these discrete continents. We used to be all one place. And so when you point to Mother Africa, it points to a point in time where these land masses were all one. And since we've been sundered, it's often divided us. And so for me, as someone who works in a library, I'm terribly interested in the things that bring us back together. We may not be able to bring the land back together, but we can bring the people together. So what you're doing seems so germane and relevant to that type of conversation.
Yeah, thank you. And Davida, we just gotta look at this as heart work,
Hard to work.
not head work, hard work. There's a book that I hope the library has. You talked about the indigenous people being enslaved by Europeans. It's called The Other Slavery. And that's an excellent, excellent resource that talks about that slavery that's not talked about because the transatlantic slave trade gets most of the focus.
See, look at you always dropping. I'm off camera, hopefully, because I'm taking notes. But I like the type of speaker that makes me just keep taking notes. So thank you, Delbert.
You're welcome.
I love you so. And before we wrap up, if folks want to find you speaking in public, I noticed that the pandemic is hopefully softening. So maybe we can get together. Folks will notice in your closing talk, we definitely have our mask on because that was during Delta, and then Omicron went and blew that out the water. So it's just, it's been quite a time. But are there places that people can find you this spring and summer?
Well, I'm glad you asked. And this is going to be aired when? In April?
We will air this on May 16th if everything goes right, or right around May.
Perfect. We'll be coming into June, which is Juneteenth. And I'll be at two locations for June. One at Festival Sunjata, which is in Seattle Center. And those dates are always Father's Day weekend. And I'll be doing an additional simultaneously Juneteenth event at Mohi, which is a museum of history and industry, June 9th through the 22nd. And there's a special storytelling session on Saturday, I believe it's the 18th from 1 to 3 p.m. And that's got to be by Eventbrite.
All right. So just saying that again for our audiences that are tuning in. If you want to see Delbert, Festival Sunjata at Seattle Center, or don't miss out on checking Mr. Richardson out at Mohi too. Lots of love to you, Delbert. I will remember that this is hard work,
Yes.
hard
Yes.
work,
Yes.
work. And I love you so much. Thank you for being who you
Thank
are.
you.
And I appreciate you so.
Thank you for making me feel special. Okay.
You are special. I just hope I amplify that. I hope I amplify that. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you.
Bye-bye.